Welcome to Physicians Keepers, where we as a physician community tackle the challenges that are unique to us by creating awareness and finding solutions from our experiences. We also learn to look out for our fellow physicians to ensure that no one is left behind. I am your host, Dr. Ali. Stay tuned and enjoy the episode.
Welcome to another episode of Physicians Keepers. I'm so excited to have you here today. Thank you so much. If you have listened to our previous episodes or this is your first time listening, it's my absolute pleasure to have you here. The goal of this podcast, YouTube channel, however you are watching, listening, is to shed a light on the problems in the physician community with the goal of bringing solutions to this problem. So if you have listened to our previous episodes, I had interviewed a couple of doctors and we had been focusing on bullying that occurs in the medical training setting. But today we're taking a little bit of a different spin on this. I am your host, Dr. Ali. And today the person that I am interviewing, she's looking at this from the other end of the spectrum. Let me put it this way. She has coached medical doctors who have been bullied. And so she knows firsthand, based on her coaching experience, the effect that this has on the doctors psychologically, and not just the doctors, but even patient care. She's seen what, the results of what bullying can do. And she's also completing a research on the rampant burnout in the medical profession. And we know that bullying does contribute to this burnout. And the importance of how conscious leadership is better for performance, impact, and return in investment. She has a PhD in conscious business ethics. She's a conscious leadership and neuroscience-based coach working with high-performing business owners, leaders, and entrepreneurs, helping them to lead, live, and run their businesses from the inside out. So help me welcome Dr. Barbara Mutedzi as she joins us on today's episode of Physicians Keepers. I am so glad to have you here today, and I'm excited to just kind of hear things from, the different end of the spectrum. I think when you had reached out to me and wanted to be a guest on this podcast, it was intriguing for me and exciting because, and different too, because I had been hearing from doctors about their experiences, but hearing from someone else who has, coached doctors and has, especially those that, went through tough experiences, burnout, bullying, depression, anxiety, just mental health issues. And just to hear from your perspective, what that looked like from you, listening to all these doctors and helping them out to reverse the mindsets that had been created through these experiences. I thought it would be great for our listeners to hear. So it's not just coming from us, it's coming from someone else. And, you're also, navigating, going to the medical field. But I'll leave that for you to share. Let me not share too much. So could you please just give us a brief introduction about yourself and just tell us a bit more about you, Dr. Barbara?
Thank you so much, Ali, for that wonderful introduction. I'm really excited to be here. I feel like this is something I've been waiting to share and I haven't found the right platform. And this is like the first platform that I found that I'm like, oh, this would be really good and helpful for other people out there. So as you said, I've got a background in conscious business ethics, and I came to that because I've always been interested in human nature, what makes us who we are. So my other qualifications include psychology and really understanding, the differences between what we say and then what we do, because there's always been a schism in when I was growing up where people would say one thing, but they would act differently. And that confused me as a child. So I went into psychology because I really wanted to understand that. And psychology seemed to answer the questions that I had. And then over time, I went into anthropology. So I've got a degree in sociocultural and medical anthropology to really understand why do we make the decisions we make around our health growing up, whether it's cultural influences or what we see on media or how we interact with our doctors and nurses in the medical field. So that's always been intriguing for me. And when it came to neuroscience, it was, okay, I've got this information in psychology and the mind and the brain. I've got this information around how we interact with our society and ourselves as human beings. So how do I take this information and use it for higher performance? And that led me into neuroscience, which is really how do we harness our minds and brains for higher performance? And one of the niche areas that I love working in is in the medical field because medical doctors are already high-performing, high-functioning people. You have taken, I don't know how many years of education to be where you are. There's a lot of grit. There's a lot of, wanting to make sure things are okay. The majority of you are in the industry because you really want to help people. You were drawn into it because you had this passion and purpose inside of you, and you wanted to really serve the community. Now, having to take all of that and put it into a system that comes with bullying or top-down leadership, and just a lot of unhealthy ways of mentorship and teaching, it really helps reduce someone to nothing sometimes. And we're not pointing fingers at anyone here because the teachers and the mentors themselves most probably went through the same system. So that's all they know. We're not also sort of, putting them off the hook in that regard, but we're just wanting to bring awareness of how that form of teaching, of coaching, of mentorship, not even just in the medical field, but in different industries, how that actually affects people's performance and then the impact those people that you hired on your customers and your patients. And then right at the end, your bottom line, right? Because everything is connected. So my coaching motto is people plus performance is equal to a higher return on investment. When our people are well taken care of in terms of being in a psychologically safe environment where they don't feel like they're being attacked or belittled, or their stress and anxiety is on high all the time, they're able to increase their performance because their brain power or resources are not engaged in the fight, flight, freeze mode, but they actually have all this free energy to now perform and concentrate on what you hired them to do. And if they're like medical doctors who came into the field with a lot of passion and purpose, they get to channel that into their work, which means that their patients that they look after are also well taken care of. When our patients are well taken care of, they look after their bodies even more. They're able to refer other people. They're able to ask questions. They become a partner in their own health journey with you, right? So it's a win-win-win for everyone because the more engaged your patients are and they're not afraid to come to the hospital or clinic, the more they actually come back because they want to know more about how do I become my own self-agent in my body in partnership with my medical doctor, right? At the end of the day, higher return on investment. So psychological safety, because I know we talk about safety, and usually when I talk about safety, we talk about the first thought that comes to mind, oh, I need to close my windows or lock my doors in the middle of the night. We think of a burglar coming in. Psychological safety is a safety within your own self, where even with all the locked doors, you might still not feel safe because someone else has taken away your right to be who you are fully.
Yeah.
Because they are bullying you and making you feel small. So when we talk about, I can give you an experience from my last permanent job where I think it was one of the last ones. And I was the only one from my own race in this organization. And I remember the leader, and I would call him more a boss than a leader because there's a difference there.
A huge difference. Yeah.
Right. He leaned into the top-down form of leadership, which is, I am the boss. I know everything. Don't make any decision without me, whether that's a good or a bad decision. Don't make any decision because, it's going to just be elevated to be something bad, even though it might be good for everyone informed. And so it was very difficult, and I felt really unsafe, even though I knew that I was qualified for the decisions that I was making because that's what they hired me for.
Yeah.
But now I had to second guess everything in case I was going to step on a boss bomb.
Yeah.
And that made me antsy. And also, I didn't realize that I already had anxiety from the past. So this triggered the anxiety within me. Now, I'm a very highly, deeply self-aware person, and I was noticing what was happening. So literally each time before I went to work, I would do meditation, I would do breath work, so I could create more expansion inside myself. But at the end of the day, I would be so exhausted. I had no energy to do anything else. Going out, even just to hang out with my friends, was too much work because all my energy was just taken from having to make sure I am put together and I don't step on anyone's toes and I'm okay.
You're in self-preservation mode.
Right?
Yeah.
And I don't know how that impacted the people around me, because sometimes we are not aware of that because I'm preserving myself, like what you said. Now, can you imagine if it was a really enjoyable space where I know that I'm here because I know what my values are, I know what my passion is, I know what my principles are, and I know why I'm here. All of that was clear for me. However, there were so many blocks. And so I was moving inch by inch, not even inch, millimeter by millimeter toward the goal.
Yeah.
And not getting there.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes, especially in the top-down way of leadership, leaders would say, well, we need to make sure that you're on track to our vision. But the challenge is if you are micromanaging me and highlighting the negatives more than the positives, then what that is doing is we are moving away from the vision and the goal, the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And your job and your role as a leader, most of it is about making sure that we do stay on track, but also making sure that I am okay. I have the resources psychologically and physically to actually do the things that you hired me for. So everything is really connected to that. And so over the years, I've been working in positions and industries where the level of leadership has been non-existent or very little, and it's stop and start. And I've seen how it's affected me and how it's also negatively affected my coworkers. And so I came into this period of conscious business ethics to say, wait a minute, surely there must be another way of treating people and working with your staff. So I went into this PhD of let me do some research and really find out. And there are so many examples of how performance increases, there's a higher return on investment. There are examples of organizations that are doing well because they're looking at that and working through that. And the one thing that creates a foundation as a leader, as a teacher, as a mentor, as a coach, a person in position of power, is to make sure that your strategy of your business, your department, your team is clear for you and transparent for you. And then you're able to communicate that clearly to your team so that they can now move ahead with that vision without having to worry. Because the worry comes from, we don't know what's going to happen because the strategy is not clear. So that's how I got into this. It's just, there's a better way of leading. And it all comes from self-awareness and just, what am I doing? How am I, doing what I'm doing? How is it affecting myself? How is it affecting people? Am I reacting? Am I creating a conducive environment? Why am I a teacher? Why am I a mentor? Why am I a coach? And then on the other side, doctors, it's why did I come here in the first place, right? Why am I getting triggered so much to the point that I forget who I am? What has got me to this journey? So it's just creating awareness around that, because that helps you remember who you are and why you're here. And then it helps you to look for resources, whether it's other people who can support you on the journey. You can create a team of people around you who you can move through that period with during your education, You can start finding examples of how other people managed. You can start speaking out as well, because now you really understand who you are and why you were there, your passion, your principles. You can remember the grit that got you through medical school and why you're here. And all of that is increasing higher vibration, higher energy. You're connected to your inner authentic self, and you're able to then step into, the reason why you're here, which is an amazing, amazing purpose when you're connected to that.
Absolutely. That's awesome. And like I said, everything that you've said, resonates with my journey, what got me to doing this, right? Because I saw firsthand the change that happened to me, the different version of myself that I was when I was bullied. I did not recognize, I didn't know that side of myself, right? I saw how it affected my performance, how it made me question everything, like how, I developed the imposter syndrome, right? Where I felt, oh my God, I should not be here. I should not be doing this. Like it, and then when that changed, the change was when, when the bully left, so to say, and I wasn't being bullied anymore, the change was obvious to people around me. Like they could see. I felt like I could breathe. Like I felt like, I just feel like, oh my God, like I could walk into that space and not feel like I had to hold my breath. And it was like I was paralyzed that whole time that I was being bullied. And I didn't know that I was, because it was such a strange sensation, never having gone through that before. But then when freedom came, so to say, it was like the shackles went off and I could then see myself for who for who I knew I was, and then the joy came back, right? I could then enjoy, I was no longer in self-preservation mode, right? Because when you're in self-preservation mode, and as a doctor, that's a very, very dangerous place to be, right? Because you're really just focusing on yourself and you just want to survive. And then you're not putting that much emphasis on the patient because, you know, as great as, I don't care, as passionate as you are about your patient and trying to help them, if you're not in a good space, if you're, if you are, it's like the classic, when you get to the plane ride in the airport and they tell you, if, this plane is going to go down, make sure you wear your own mask before you help those around you. So it's like you're trying to wear your own mask to get air. There's so much you can do in trying to focus. Even the person that you love next to you, you have to breathe first before you can actually help the other person beside you breathe. So being in a toxic environment, or like an environment where you're being bullied or you feel like you're not getting the right mentorship, that's kind of what that feels like. It's like you're just trying to survive, and then you're just taking one, like every day is felt with just trying to, let me get you today. Let me just, let me just get enough mentally to just get you today. I don't know what tomorrow's going to hold, but if I can just, you don't look forward to anything else. I just want this day to, let me just hold on to what I have today so that I can still find the strength to go on tomorrow. So I said everything that you've said, just totally resonates with me. And so that's why I said when you had reached out, I was like, I want to hear what someone else who's had a lot of experience with the mindset and who's coached, high performance. And I'm wondering who let you into the secret that doctors are high performing people. Like, who told you that? But yes, we are. It's, I don't know, it's just one of those things. We want to do well, and in that we want to help people, right? And so we know that to help people, we have to be the best versions of ourselves. Like we have to be in our A game, right? We go into this profession knowing that we're going to spend years and years of training, but then we're not daunted by it, right? Because we're like, okay, there's a higher purpose to this, right? There's something we want to achieve, and it's not just our betterment, it's for the betterment of someone else, And so when you go in with such, when you go in with such drive, because you have to be driven, like you have to be driven, you have to be, because, I have 3 kids, and sometimes when I tell them, they're like, Mommy, if I were to be a doctor, how long is it going to take? And I'm like, it takes this, and they're like, ah, all that much schooling? Oh my God. But we heard that and it didn't, we knew it was a lot, but we still wanted to go ahead and, we embraced it knowing that because we had a higher goal, so coming into this space where, or coming to a setting where you then find yourself being undervalued, being undermined because, like you said, it may have been because the individual ahead of you that's the way, that's the pattern they know. They don't know any better. It's it's a lot. And like I said, it's just I'm really glad for this, where we can come to this point where we have these open discussions. I said not to finger point, I mean, but not at the same time not to absolve blame from these individuals, but to say, look, this is a problem. And it's not a problem that we can just say, oh, it's there, we can't fix it. We can actually fix it. Like we can do something about it. So thank you so much for all the work that you've done into this. And I'm sure that as many physicians who've come into your space or who've, heard, I mean, just from our previous conversation, you know, I I I I felt your heart behind what you do. And I know, just like I said, just to change that or the shift or the focus or perspective that it gave me having these conversations with you. Yeah. So thank you.
You're so very welcome. I have a few questions for you as well, because I really loved some of the examples you gave in our past conversation. For example, being someone from another country and coming into a space where already you're feeling a bit nervous because it's natural when coming from a different space and moving into another space. You're sort of trying to navigate what you know and wanting to make sure that it fits into what is already there. Like, I would love to hear you explain your journey of being an international medical doctor, who's now speaking to the world as well, right? Because that's amazing, because you're bringing those conversations onto a platform where other people around the world can have access to. So, would you take us through your journey, perhaps starting?
I mean, so my first, when I came in and because I told you there was that fire, I was like, I'm just going to start. So I registered for my boards. I was like, okay, I'm going to take step one. And then I got pregnant, right? And I'm on the extreme end. So I get hyperemesis, so I'm sick, I'm vomiting, I'm just miserable. I'm 1 minute think I'm going to die because I can't keep anything in my stomach. And I'm like, how am I going to study? So I remember well, I mean, I was 7 months and then my exam was like a month away. And I knew I was not prepared. Like I knew I hadn't studied. There was this part of me that said, just do it. Just do it. Just do it and get it done with. You've been studying. You're so tired. Thankfully I had enough sense to reach out to someone, and that's why I was encouraged folks, do not do this journey on your own. Like, don't think you can do it on your own. Like, ask questions. People who have gone ahead of you, ask them questions, you know. So I reached out to her. I said, hey, this is, I'm preparing for my boards. I'm really so sick. She's like, do not take that exam. Forfeit that money, because that was what's going to happen. She's like, let the money go. You're not ready. This is not something you can just wing. Like, make sure you're ready. So I had to go with this as create the saddest face I could possibly create and go tell my husband, I'm like, I'm so sorry, but this money has to go. Like, I cannot, like, it can't happen, and he didn't, he was initially, like, because there's a lot of money then, it was like, yes, it has to go because I was told that I was told not to do it, you know? And so in between that process, trying to prepare, it took 7 years for me to actually get into residency. And at some point in time, initially, I had I thought I wanted to do OBGYN, and that was my initial goal. 'Cause part of it, my dad, that's what he did. But then, coming to find out that, that's maybe a harder path for IMGs, I was like, okay, the easier path then was family medicine. And I didn't mind that, I was like, okay, this is good. I could get some skills in OBGYN. And if I still want to do OBGYN, I could do a fellowship because there was a pathway for that. So that was my whole mindset when I first started. And so when I got into residency, like I said, I'm 7 years post graduation. I was terrified. Like all I had known prior to that was mommy brain. I've been a mom for 7 years. I was keeping up with medicine, but not this. It's different. It's different when you're actively practicing. And in the States, it's not like the UK where you can go with your medical license and practice. In the States, until you actually do residency, you're technically not seen as a doctor because you can't practice. So even when I was being addressed as a doctor, because I wasn't practicing, there was still this disconnect. It's like, am I really one because I'm not practicing? So when I got in, it was like trying to then realize that I'm a doctor still. Like it took it took a while for that to connect. And I don't know if that there was that anxiety because I want to do well. I want to excel. Like I've never been a slacker. I've never been someone who's been mediocre. Like I always try to push myself to excel. So I come into this environment, I'm terrified. I'm like, I hope the best of me shows up because that's really what I want these folks to see. And then, like I said, I don't know if my bully was like a shark that smelled blood in the water and just smelled my fear, felt my anxiety. I was like, this is a prime candidate for whatever. I don't know. Till today, I have no clue what he saw that made him. And this was a third-year resident. So I walk into that space, like, I'm like, okay, I was very open with, those around me. I'm like, hey, I've been out of the circle for a little while. Like, it's going to take me a while to like get into the rhythm of things. Like, so just be patient with me. Like, I work hard. I want feedback. Like, if you feel like I'm not doing well, like, you let me know and I'm glad to work on it. I'm not afraid of feedback, right? If it comes from a healthy space and you want me to do better, I want you to tell me, you know? And so I go in, and then, like I said, there was so much anxiety, so much I could not think. Now, mind you, I'd never dealt with anxiety before. I'd heard people deal with it, but never. And even the bullying thing, right? Grade school never happened. College, it never happened. And so I'm an adult, right? So I'm thinking I've passed that stage where someone can actually treat me wrong or, do that. So it didn't occur to me that I should prepare for such things or I should know how to stand my ground or know how, because I just wasn't ready for that. And so when I come into that space and I see this individual like deliberately, and 'cause so one of the things about bullying people have to understand, it's a repetitive thing, right? It's not just a one-off, someone says something, nasty to you or no, it was a repetitive thing. So then I saw this pattern of me asking for help and then that help being thrown back in my face. It's like, hey, just very simple things. Do you know what format I can use to write this H&P? And what they tell me is, why don't you go through every single format in the EMR and find what works for you? But you know that that's not the standard. There was a standard that was being used, but you deliberately try to make this hard for me. So I didn't understand that. Like, I was like, what's going on? And like I said, because I was anxious, I wasn't thinking. So I'm like, okay, maybe. And then there was, residents talk among themselves and you get to hear stuff being floated around. And so one of the things that came back to me was like, this resident just said, you're just too stupid for them to work with. And so it was like, I was like, okay, am I really stupid? I've never known myself to be a stupid person. Then I started questioning my intelligence. I started questioning, but I'm like, I made it this far. I can't have been a stupid person if so all that's going on in my head. And then I reach out. So I see the pattern and I'm like, I see, like you said, you're in that environment where you feel like you can't breathe. Rod, I come to work. I'm so like, if I walk into the room and that individual is there, it's like my brain goes to mush. Like, it's like the anxiety just paralyzes me and I can't, you ask me a question. I'm like, I'm supposed to know that, but I don't because I'm like, if I say the wrong thing, there they are staring at me and it's like, they already think you don't know anything. And then if you dare say anything wrong, then it's like, so it was, it was a lot. I felt like I was drowning and I didn't know who to reach out to. I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't know what to do. And I said, no one had ever shared their experience with me before that they had gone through. I felt I was alone. I felt like this was just happening to me and no one else had walked this walk before. And so I remember reaching out to my my then chief resident that time, and I asked her, I was like, hey, did I do anything to this individual? Like, I wanted to talk, and I was like, maybe I said something, or maybe, and so I asked, and her response was like, oh, well, my upper level treated me wrong. So it's part of the cycle. Deal with it. When he goes, then it'll be okay. So then I was like, okay, maybe that's what I need to do. Like, I didn't know to take it up further. Like, I didn't know that not, maybe I should have reached out to someone else different. Maybe I should have, spoken to someone's like, I didn't know. Because like I said, I'm new. I just got into a space I'd been looking to get to. Finally got into a residence. I felt grateful to be there. So I didn't want to start ruffling any feathers or start stepping on anyone's toes. I didn't want to just create any strife. Like, I didn't know, I just wanted to just keep my head down and work. But keeping my head down, I was being buried, in that. And so I remember I would call my mom and I'll be like, Mom, I have an enemy at work. What does that even mean? Like, how do I just get here? And then just, and so I didn't know how the days were going. I just knew the days were going. Like, I would go to sleep not looking forward to waking up the next morning. And so I remember there was a day I sat down, because I started my training inpatient. I sat down from morning till 7, and I didn't know that I had not eaten. Like, I didn't know that it wasn't until 7 p.m. I just started feeling this intense hunger. I was like, oh my, I felt like I was about to pass. I was like, what's going on? I was like, oh my God, I was so, I was just trying to survive. I didn't even know that I couldn't sleep. I wasn't resting. Like, I would come home every day crying. My husband was like, what is going on with you? And I'm like, he felt so helpless because he couldn't help me. Like, he's not in this space. He didn't, and so it wasn't until a day I was driving, and I remember this day so well. I had got into a traffic circle. It was early in the morning. I was going to work, and one of the things that just came was like, what if you don't turn? Like, what if you don't turn the wheel? Like, what if you just leave the car? Like, I didn't know. I just knew I didn't want to show up at work. I didn't know what that would mean. I didn't. I wasn't looking past not showing up. That's just. I was like, what would just be like for you not to show up? And the only way I could think I'm not showing up was just to let go of the wheel. It wasn't until then it just hit. It's like, you're depressed. Like, this is depression. I had lost about 30 pounds. I'd had a panic attack one day in front of my attending doctor. When it was happening, I literally did not know what was happening because I never experienced a panic attack before. All of a sudden, 1 minute I'm talking, the next minute I'm like, I could not breathe. And it's like, what's happening to me? And then it was 10 minutes later, I'm like, I just had a panic attack. This is what this feels like. So then I'm like, oh my God, I'm depressed. I'm anxious. Like, that's why I can't think. That's why. So, and it's not to say, and I don't know if it's because of the way medicine is structured and because it's how intense it is, especially training, is that I was going to work every day surrounded by 30 plus doctors, but no one could tell that this resident was drowning. And if not by divine intervention, honestly, it would have been a different story. That's the best. It would have been a different story because I felt like I didn't know what step to take. So I remember being called into my program director's office, and then she's like having this conversation with me. She's like, did everyone help you during your, transition? And I sat down there. I was like, what do I say? Do I say that I felt like I was being treated poorly? So then I was like, okay, yes, the second year helped me. This person, I just mentioned both names, like they helped me. But I didn't mention the other individual's role in it and then she's like, okay, you got to step up your performance, you know, um, and then once they start to throw probation word around, like when you're a resident, you just go into, oh Lord, it's like your career just flashes before your eyes and like, oh my God, is my career over? You know? And so once you start saying, well, if you don't, your entrance exam is coming, you got to do well on that because we're going to really look into that to see are you a good fit for this program? And then I just go into like, oh, what is this? So it was horrible. It really was. And he talked about patient safety, and I could totally relate with that. Totally, because people don't understand how important that is, how a physician needs to feel safe, because otherwise that compromises patient care. Because I can give a first-hand example. I had an instance where I had to do a call with this individual. I was the only intern. I mean, so it was like a 12-hour call, and this individual was the third year there. And even before that happened, someone had reached out to me and was like, hey, do you know who you're doing this call with? Would you rather you switch with me? And I was like, okay, so you know that I'm not being treated fairly, or you won't say anything about it, or you won't confront the individual. But then, so I didn't even know if it was a test. I didn't know if they were trying to I didn't know if it was genuine, right? And so then I was like, okay, that's no problem. I'll do my call. I'll try to be professional. I'm a professional. I can work with anyone. You don't have to like me to work with me, And so that day, I was left alone with the pager, but in the call room by myself throughout. Now, if anything had happened, right, I would not, and I'm so glad it didn't, but I would not have reached out to that individual that day. He was supposed to be the one in charge of me, so to say, like teaching me. I would have been more comfortable reaching out to somebody else outside my program to ask for help. Now, how does that help the patient? It doesn't. It's because whoever is outside doesn't know the patient. The best person to have asked for help will be the one who is in charge of the patient. But I wasn't going to do that. I literally wasn't going to do that. And even when that day, I had an encounter with him where we had a patient who was in the ER and we got called to go to the ER. And so I'm here, I call, I'm like, hey, we have a patient who's been admitted. And he says, meet me down there. So I go there, we're talking to this patient. And if you're familiar with medical training, what usually happens is they, when your upper level is talking to you, they would say, okay, they would go to the whole scenario. They want you to be involved in the patient, asking the patient questions because they know that that's the role you are going to, play that, very soon. He just completely ignores me, just talks to the patient like I'm not there, just like I'm not relevant. And then right after that, he just says, now we're standing together like face to face. He just says, I will email you the plan. Like the way it usually works is right after that encounter, they sit down, they talk to you, you all go through the plan together, you have a physical conversation. And he just tells me he's going to email me the plan. So basically saying that I was too stupid to even comprehend any discussion. And all the best he could do was email it to me. And so when I left that call that day, I was like, did this just happen? Did I just get treated further like dirt? And I reached out to someone. I was like, hey, I called. I was like, hey, this just happened. Like, what is this? And he was like, oh my God, that's so horrible. That's so bad. But then nothing, did not offer to say, hey, let me talk to this individual. Like, that's not right. So I felt very alone. And that's the bit, I felt so terribly alone. Yeah, and, I was struggling. I really was. And I didn't know where to reach out to. So as I said, as God will have it and just kind of divine intervention, my program director, like I said, she had called me to the office and she had told me about my engineering exam. She's like, you got to do well in this. So I just put every spare time I had that I could think, I just put into studying. I just put into I have to break through. I have to break through. Something has to give. And so when the exam came and I passed and I got the highest score in the engineering exam for my batch, it was like, oh, okay, she's not stupid. You know, excuse me, it was like suddenly everyone just had this self-awareness. Okay, I felt seen, and so I could, and that, I think that for me, that was my turning point. That was my breaking point. It's like, okay, the real me finally found its way to come out through something. Like I'm not I work hard. I'm not a dumb person, and so then, honestly, I don't know how to describe it, but it was like every time I had walked into any clinical setting, either it was the inpatient, outpatient, I could not breathe. But right after that experience, and it wasn't once, it was like when the results came out, then that individual, like a couple of weeks later, they left because they had finished your training. And so when I walked into my program, I felt like I can
Mm.
breathe,
Mhm.
like I can think, like it, the whole atmosphere, it changed. Like it was amazing. Like I felt like I belonged. I didn't feel like an imposter anymore. I felt like, I could do this. Like
Mhm.
this makes sense. I felt like my career was back in my hands, so to say. You know, and you talked about, I mentioned to you, even I was working. This is my second go around with another doctor, and they were looking at me like, when I was talking and presenting confidently, they asked me like, "What happened to you?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" They were like, "You're a whole different person. Like this you we're seeing, and we didn't know that. You know, we didn't know it was in there." And so I just laughed about it. I was like, but they didn't. I said I didn't share. They didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. They didn't know all the battles I'd been dealing with. So this version of me they thought was a new version, but this was the original me. This was the original me coming out. So through that experience, my confidence grew, right? So I could walk into a room as opposed to before I walk into a room and I want to shrink back. I don't want anyone to hear my voice because I couldn't contribute. I would walk into a room and I would take charge. Like I would take charge of the room. I would take charge of, I was, and my clinical skills definitely and my clinical knowledge had grown, but not as much as my confidence. My confidence was what had been robbed of, so to say, with that experience. And so once the confidence came back, it wasn't hard for everything else to just fall in line. And then I could trust my clinical reasoning. I could trust my clinical judgment. Like patient care under me, like tried. I could pick out things. I could get engaged in the conversations with the other doctors. Like I could say, hey, I don't feel like, oh, something's wrong. Like I could look up, things in the chart. I could be like confident, say, hey, I think we missed this on this patient. Like, and so even those who were in the previous batch with this previous individual that he had like talked about, with me and said, when they came in contact with me, I had not one, not two come back to me. I was like, oh, you know, we didn't know this. Like, we thought we were not going to be able to trust you with this, you know, because I had, and one even came to meet me, and she was one of those brutally honest people. She came to meet me. She said, when I was told that you were going to be the second year, and during this rotation, I initially didn't want you to I didn't want it. I actually asked for somebody else, but I was not given that option. And it so happened that she had some family things she was dealing with that she could not be present fully during that rotation. So basically, I had to be the one doing the work of both a second year and a third year, and also mentoring the intern. And so when it was, sh- I took charge. I would look after my patients, look after the first year's patients. Like I would do all that. And there was not, if the attendant doctor came into, you couldn't tell that there were any gaps, or you couldn't tell that something was a bit off just because of her home situation. And so she had all this going on. So she thought because I was going to be, because of my past experience with this individual, that it was going to be a disaster. And then when she saw that, I basically did I stepped into her role and did most of the work. She had to come tell me, she's like, thank you. Like I'm really impressed that, I was worried, but then thank you for, you know, I'm sorry that I thought this way about you, but I can see that you really stepped up, and you step. And what changed? What really changed? It was the environment, right? The toxicity, the individual left. I mean, that. So, and I've met people who, and I'll give an example of a friend of mine. She started a program, and her first 2 weeks, she was calling me excited. She's like, "Oh my God, like they love me here. Things are going really well. I feel so confident. Like when I talk, they tell me that, hey, you take charge of things." And then 2 weeks later, she calls me almost crying, saying, "I don't know if I can do this. It's too much for me." And I'm like, excuse me. I'm like, what changed? And then all of a sudden she was in a different environment with somebody else who was undermined, like could not trust her skills, did not know how to create that space for mentorship, or did not have that great leadership. So the same individual, two different environments, and now you're seeing two different people showing up because of who's on top of them, you know. So it going through all that, and just kind of narrowing, going through all that made me understand and made me I started right from by the time it was my second year, I'm like, I'm going to make sure that I don't ever treat anyone, it made me a better leader. It was a hard way to be a better leader, but it did, it made me a better leader. So then I was more attentive to like my first years, my second years, like I could already anticipate what would be a struggle for them, and I would prepare them for it. I'll be like, okay, this is what's going to happen. This is what you're going to be asked. And so I would I guess I overcompensated in a way, though. I kind of coddled them in a way. I always made sure that they did not feel like they were being left to fail or being hung out, to dry, because that's the way I felt. That I felt like I was being set up to fail, and I didn't want them to feel that way. I wanted them to feel like they belonged, so I would go out of my way. Like if someone called them from another specialty to like berate them, or I would call them back, like, hey, you can't talk to them like this. Like we're all learning. Like you have to learn how to be compassionate. Like there's a way, if you felt like what I did was wrong, there's a way you can talk to me. But I mean, we're all doctors. The fact that you're ahead of me right now in training, that's just this time. Once we leave this academic setting, we're all the same. That hierarchy is gone. So if you are in a position to treat another doctor poorly and you do so, you never know. It's a small world. You never know where you're going to find yourself, and then needing their help, hopefully never clinically, right? Needing their help. But then if they're triggered by their experience with you and it was a horrible one, better pray that they've forgiven you so that they can, treat you right, because yes, it was a journey for me. And that's one of the reasons I was like, I don't even want anyone to ever have to go through this. Like what can I do? Like how can I lend my voice to this? Like how can I make sure that, and I said, he may not have been taught the right way. That's probably the way he was treated. But how can we make sure that we are producing individuals in medical training that have the right mindset, right? I mentioned to you last visit that I came across, I was doing my second rotation at the VA. I was doing internal medicine, and I met an internal medicine doctor, nephrologist. Um, I met her for 2 weeks. I stayed under her guidance for 2 weeks. After those 2 weeks, if I had the option to be a nephrologist, which there was no path for me because I'm from family medicine, I would have switched. Not because I had taught much of nephrology, but because I met this individual who, even though she knew that I was never going to become a nephrologist, her behavior, like her mindset towards me, she, not just me, like I said, which is all of us, I could see that she wanted me to learn. I could see that she felt invested, even though, like I said, I was only going to know her for 2 weeks. She felt invested in making sure that I had enough skills, to treat my patients in case I came across such a case like a nephrology case, like, and there were no questions. She would sit us down after rounds. She would ask questions. Like, I could see the heart that she had. And I mean, for coming from where I was, from where I had been, to see someone who I felt like, oh my gosh, she's amazing. Like, she, she, she just, I feel free. I feel like I can talk to her about anything. I feel like I can let her know my struggles. Like, I feel like if I felt like I was burnt out, I feel like this was too much for me, like, I could easily reach out to her. She created that type of environment. And so I was like, I want to create that environment for people. I want people to, as doctors, I want medical doctors, students, residents, anyone in training to go into a space where they feel like they can be confident themselves enough to even ask the questions that may seem foolish. Like, hey, I don't know this. Like, I want to know it because it's going to help my patient. And one of the things that had helped me, a friend of mine told me, was that she said, look, knowledge is not congenital, right? Everything that is learned, that is known, was taught. So there's no superiority when it comes to knowledge. The fact that you know something today is because someone taught you, right? And so you should not feel puffed up. I mean, being a medical educator or you're an attending doctor, it's a privilege to teach another physician. It's a privilege to be able to impart knowledge for the benefit of the patient. And so, as part of the goal with Physicians Keepers was to say, we always talk about doctors is we have this code to say, do the patient no harm. But then why do we then go about and harm our own fellow physician, right? Why can't we extend that mindset to our fellow physicians, like, do no harm to your fellow physician? And so in a lot of institutions, right, there is no training as to how to be a better doctor. Like, there's no leadership training. There's nothing to that effect as to say you're going to come into this position of leadership, either as a second year, a third year, an attending doctor, a fellow. How do we make sure that we instill the right type of mindset in you so that you would learn how to pull other people up and not tear them down in the process of trying to, because there's a difference, right? You can teach with the intention of tearing down, or you can teach with the intention of building up. So there's no structure set up in our medical training that, facilitates this, or that brings people into this consciousness that you have to learn how to be a better educator. Like, you have to learn how to create that environment, because burnout is real. Depression is, I went through all the stages you can think of psychologically when it comes to this. And so, I'm hoping, like I said, just in having conversations with, great minds like yours and the other doctors that I have had the privilege to talk to, that we can create that environment for doctors to train and, be free. I hope that sounds like a miracle, but be free of bullying, because it's already a stressful environment on its own. And then to compound that, it makes for poor outcomes. It makes for poor outcomes all the way around, both to the patient and to the physician. So I don't know if I can say that in a nutshell, but in a nutshell, that's my story. That's all this year is this.
Oh my goodness.
Backed up in a story.
So much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I've been taking notes down, so many points that you have shared, and I don't have enough paper, but I'll just share some of the things that sort of popped up when you were speaking. So, right at the beginning, you talked about how bullying is not just a once-off event, right? It happens. It's like someone is chipping away at your self-confidence, who you are. You start questioning yourself, and it's gaslighting, right? Like, you know who you are, but this person is treating me this way. So what's going on? So you start getting confused within yourself. And if you had past trauma, that's perpetuated. So you're talking about, when you came into the environment, how maybe they were like a shark circling. So perhaps there were things in myself that I wasn't aware of, but they were aware of, and so they started chipping away at that. So instead of teaching to elevate me, they were teaching to bring me down, which is a totally different environment. You're an environment that is infested by sharks as opposed to dolphins. Yeah. I don't know if that's a good analogy, but there you go. And feeling alone and not knowing that perhaps other people are going through that until you actually start having that conversation. And then even when you start having that conversation, finding that others who went through that actually don't care anymore because they have just been worn out to just say, well, that's how the medical field is, so just suck it up kind of thing, which is not helpful for anyone, for them or for anyone that they mentor. You talked about days were just going, like life was just being lost. And, you felt lost and you weren't looking after your own self as a doctor. And you would go through periods where you didn't eat that one time. So how, if we can't take care of our own selves because of the way that we are being taught and the environments that we're in, how can we then help the patient? How are the patients going to come back? Yeah. How is that going to affect the bottom line, right? So this speaks to medical directors and administrators in the hospitals. How are we making sure that our students, our doctors are okay so that the skill set that they have, that they opted to go into and they're passionate about, they can use it to the best of their ability for everyone's benefit, themselves, the patients, the environment, the hospitals, our bottom line, all of that. You talked about one of the biggest things that also came out for me was mental health. How you were surrounded by medical doctors and no one knew that you were going through this, right? We put on this mask, this I need to survive. So let me just, bite my teeth, just go through it.
You don't want to
And
feel
then
like
you
you're
become, right? Because then when you're weak, then you get attacked for that as well, as if you're a robot, but you're not, right? And there's no, I love, I wrote this down, I wrote allyship, and then I started laughing in my head because your name is Ali. And I was like, look at Ali, she's being an ally for future medical doctors, right? You're being an ally for people who are coming into the world to say, I want to go into this field. You're speaking up so that they can also not lose their voice. They don't forget the reason why they're there, their purpose, their values, their principles, their reasoning for being there, right? So you're being an ally for everyone. You're being an ally by speaking about the people who supported you. You talked about the nephrologists who really supported you and how that helped you remember who you are and want to actually be in that environment, right? Even though it's all the hard work that you went through and all the bullying that you still wanted to be there because of the good leadership. And how that's so very important when we are helping other people and treating other people and mentoring them. You spoke about a lot of things. I'm so passionate about this. I'm so very happy. And when I get happy, I speak very fast. So if I'm speaking too fast, please slow me down. But a lot of things, right? How to become a better leader because you've got the experience of when you were, being led in a different way, you flourished. And then you took those nuggets and now you're wanting to create better environments for other people. Yes, fair and fine. You didn't like the way that you were treated, which is not great. But instead of going back to the old ways of what you were shown, you reflected on yourself and said, I don't want to treat other people this way. And that's why self-awareness is very important. So you turned that on its head and said, how do I support other people in a different way? Which means that, we can teach other people in a different way. We can change. We choose how we want to change. And so you're setting people up to win, right? By allowing them to really understand and hold on to their identity. Because when they bring that strong identity and groundedness into the space, they're able to flourish and contribute even more. They're able to also hold space for their colleagues, right? So it's not only the job of the leader, because what the leader has done is you've created that psychological safety so that those who are in leadership actually step in as well and look after their team members. So it's got that effect of just communing with each other and speaking and listening and sharing information so we are all winning. And it's not about tearing people down. So this is beautiful. I mean, I just love this because it goes back to the emotional intelligence. You are deeply self-aware because you did the journey of self-inquiry. Why do I not feel so great? What would I have wanted? What can I do with that moving forward? So you've created your emotional capacity to say, okay, this is what I want. This is what my global vision is. This is why I've created the space of allyship, pun intended, to have these conversations so that people can really see that there's a different way of going through medical school. There's a different way of serving other people. There's a different way of engaging everyone around us so that we all grow together, we flourish together. We start actually using everything that we bring to the table in a bigger light. I'm not constricted. I'm not wearing a mask just to protect myself.
We're fully present. Yeah.
I'm fully present. But this is amazing, and I love that. So thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you. It's
Just
like I said, it's,
amazing.
I remember you had asked me then, you had asked me, you said, we talked about the healing process, right? Where we had said, and one of the things that I had, I felt like I needed to do, but maybe not so much now. I felt like I wanted to ask questions. Like, I wish I had asked. I would say, why? Like that question of why did he do this to me? Like, why? Like, just tell me why, but, you know, and you had mentioned about, how we heal in different ways, right? Some people, it's like, they go shout, scream, vent, do all that. And I said, I think that for me, talking about doing this, like talking about sharing my story, even though sometimes I'm like, maybe I should not have shared that much, but sharing my story is my healing. Like, it's trying to make sure that it doesn't happen again, or at least someone feels like they were not alone, right? Where I can actually, like, the kind of where this is, be a physician's keeper, right? Where I know that I'm actually doing something to look out for another physician is my way of healing. Like, it's my way of saying, just, it's okay. Like, telling myself, going back to me of then and saying, even if no one could talk for you then, I'm talking for you now. Like, even if you felt like no one was there for you, or no one could see you, or no one could understand you, I'm here for you now. I understand you. Um, I'm your voice. You needed a voice then. It wasn't there, but I'm that voice that's speaking for you now. And so that's one of the reasons that I'm just doing what I do. I just feel like I have my voice. I just have to speak. So thank you so much. Thank you for it's been an amazing experience talking with you, and I'm really looking forward to working with you in the future. Like I said, it's um I may be biased, but I believe that medical doctors are very special people. And so um trying to make sure that we learn how to take care of ourselves, right? Because a lot of times we are so busy taking care of others that, that's why you would hear, I mean, stories upon stories of physicians who are, I mean, we're at high risk of suicide, right? Because we're so focused on trying to, we can be consumed with you know, other people's illnesses, other people's um, disease management, and trying to fix other people. That is very easy. You get so involved in that you don't look inward to see that you are actually broken, or that you are at your breaking point. And so, yeah.
Amazing. I love that. And, sometimes when we focus on other people, it's because we ourselves have gone through so much trauma and so much hurt that having to look back and take care of ourselves feels like I'm having to re-traumatize myself to be able to get better. So it's better I just focus on other people,
Yes, than to do the work on myself. Yeah.
right? But unfortunately, we can only lead other people only to the level at which we ourselves are at emotionally and psychologically. So that's not helpful for anyone.
Not at all. Not at all. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
an absolute pleasure.
And so, if, I mean, if you are in this space, if you're listening to us and you have a similar story and you want to share that story, absolutely, I would love to have it. Anything we've said resonates with you, I would love to have you on. You can send us an email, drremelor@gmail.com, and I'll put that in the footnotes. You can send, if you can join. I started an Instagram channel on this, so Lord help me with that. You can join our Instagram channel. If you know someone who had a similar story that you think they would like to share their story, you think, there would be you know, it's good for their voice to be heard, because sometimes, like I said, that brings healing. You can reach out to me, drremelor@gmail.com, and I will be glad to get you on and to share your story. And let's be our physicians keepers. Let's make sure that no physician is left behind. So thank you, Dr. Barbara. I know you have something planned. I know you have as part of your coaching. Could you please let us in on it?
Yeah, I have what is called a Lead from Within taster. It's a free 7-day journey so it's both for those who've qualified as doctors already and those who are going through medical school, and not just for the medical fields, for any person who's going through an intense period of education and are now, a high performer, and really want to reconnect with their values, their purpose, and their principles, or even to elevate it so that as they're going through challenges, they don't forget that. So it's a 7-day journey where we follow what is called the Mutedzi 3D protocol. So Mutedzi is my last name. I put in all my education into the information that I researched around that. The 3D protocol, it's define, design, display. So I help you really define who you are, your values, your principles, your purpose. And this is audio recorded at your convenience. So you can take it as you're going through life, your everyday life. It's not like a separate thing that you do on the side. So you define who you are. I at least get you on that path of really understanding and asking the questions, who am I? Why am I here? Why am I doing what I'm doing? That's the define part. The second D is design. Then say, okay, what can I do to make sure that I don't sway away from this? What are the structures, the strategies, the people I can, look out for or look for who can support me on this journey? The display part is, what are the habits and behaviors that I can engage in or with every single day to make sure that what I've defined and designed is still on track. I don't fall away from that. So it just introduces the concepts for you so you can have those questions in your mind. So whatever you're going through or have gone through, you have sort of a template that you can use moving forward. It's a 7-day process. You get an email every day of those 7 days. It's audio recorded. And you can just engage with it every day at your own time, just to almost like rewire your brain if you veered off course of your values, principles, and purpose. And also just to remember yourself and hold on to that, because your true essence is important. All of us have a beautiful gift. And the more we speak up, the more we engage with that, the more we stay on track, the more we hold space for ourselves and for other people, and the more we can connect to the global vision, our national vision, our community vision, our family vision, which is just amazing. So we'll probably put the link in a show notes for the link and just sign up. It's ready for you.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you for all that you do for the physician community.
Yeah.
Your wisdom is truly invaluable. And, for those I would probably leave the remaining phase of your journey for you to share probably at some other time. But there's a likelihood that you become more of one of us in the not too far future.
Yeah.
We're gonna bond at a different level at that time. Yes, absolutely. But thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today. And please like, share, subscribe. If anything we've said has resonated with you, just get the word out. Like I said, we're doing this because we know something needs to change. We don't just want to talk about things and just not have a solution for it. But we want to bring a solution. We want to make sure that we do not lose any physician, to in the space of being overwhelmed, being bullied, depression, anxiety, suicide. We don't want to lose any physician if we can change things around. And so thank you, Dr. Barbara. Appreciate it.
Thank you. This is amazing. Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please like, share, and subscribe, and invite your fellow physician to come join this amazing physician community. See you next episode. Thank you.